They're recording.
Well, here we are on the first day of March. And I'm going to tell you a lot of rather funny things about the calendar. Now, the calendar that we use in the world of business, and I guess in international affairs, was invented by Julius Caesar, great emperor. And for Julius Caesar, who thought that the Romans should control all the lands around the Mediterranean Sea, the first and the most important god was the god of war, Mars. And that's when they learned to march in Mars. Oh my goodness. And the war horses learned how to act like war horses. Also, the Romans could have something called an empire. So the first month, oh yes, and a month is a month. We use the moon to mark the months. But that's only about 28 days long. That's going to cause some problems. Okay, so the first month of the year was Mars. Now the second month was called April, which was the month of the goddess Venus, the goddess of love and beauty. And they didn't realize that the evening star and the morning star are both Venus. Oh well. And the next was the month called Mayo, the goddess of youth. You know, kids growing up. And then came Juno, the goddess of menstruation, when girls start to become like ladies. And then they decided to name the next months after July for Julius Caesar. And his full title was Julius Caesar Augustus. And Augustus means very reverend. So July was named for Julius Caesar, and Augustus was named for Julius's title. Now something funny happened. Next month is September. Now septem is the Roman word for 7. September was the 7th month. And octo is the word for 8. So October was the 8th month. And November was the word for 9. So November was the 9th month. And then comes something that's connected to decibels. And it's called December. Yep. And it's all about the number 10. And it's the 10th month of the year. Well, that was kind of a problem, you know, because time went on. So they invented a god that they could call January, because Janus was where you buried the ancestors of your family at the entrance to your property. So that was kind of easy. January. Whoops, I got to blow my nose here. But what were they going to do about February? Well, they already had some things that had to happen on February. One included fumigating to get rid of bad smells, and general house cleaning, and then just general tomfoolery by the young men who like to especially slap old ladies on the butt. Crazy. So that's how the calendar started. And that's how the calendar sort of finished. believe me, it had to be adjusted more than once because there are more than 12 months in a year. And really, it's the sun that tells us when the seasons are. And it takes the earth 365 and a quarter years to go around the sun. Well, we all know something that we had to do about it. We divided the months into different lengths. 30 days has September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31, except for February. Well, every 4 years we have what we call leap year. And if you're born on the 29th of February, you only get a birthday every 4 years. That's not good news, is it? Well, let's look at some other notions about the calendar. Jewish people have 2 calendars, 2 New Years. Yep. The oldest one goes back to when they were shepherds who kind of had to wander with the seasons and make their way with tents. And this is what we find in the book of Exodus. Moses had just led the people out of Egypt. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month shall mark for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. You shall observe this ordinance through all the generations." Well, that was when they started their journey, and for 7 weeks they would only eat what Norwegians would call flatbread, unleavened bread. They were on the move. Until they get to something called a week of weeks. A week of weeks is 7 weeks, and on the 50th day, which in Greek is called Pentecost, all of a sudden they could switch to making bread with sourdough yeast in it. And if you want to read a beautiful story that connects to that, it's the story found in the book of Ruth, which is all about a drought and having to move to another country. And then when they get back, Ruth goes out into the fields for the harvest of barley and the harvest of wheat. Now, the story of Ruth is so beautiful and so important, I can only recommend that you read it. And when the Jewish people get to the 49th day, they all read the story of Ruth as a kind of a celebration. And then it ends with fresh sourdough bread. Now, in the Lord's Prayer, as it's remembered in Matthew, we have this give us the day, our daily bread goes like this, which means bread enough for tomorrow, give us today. Because you see, you had to start by mixing the old sourdough into the dough, and so you have to have tomorrow's bread started the day before. Well. Most calendars follow the moon. And something happened to the Jewish people that made them invent a second calendar. When King Nebuchadnezzar conquered the city of Jerusalem, about 30,000 people from Jerusalem had to walk many days, many miles to Babylon. And in Babylon, they were put to work building canals for His Majesty the King, because he was taking water from the Euphrates River and making channels. And my goodness, they found out that they were eating better over there than they had ever eaten before. And there's something in the 23rd Psalm that tells us what happened. That's it, Psalm 23, here we go. Now the first part of the 23rd Psalm is all about sheep and shepherds. But then it changes in the middle. And it's all about being in Babylon. So here's how it changes. It's not about sheep and shepherds at all. Oops. There we go. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Oh dear. They're strangers, and the people around them are enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy chase me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. Now what they found was over there in Babylon, there was a lot more good food to eat than they'd ever had before. And so they slowly adopted the Babylonian New Year. And so what Jewish people call New Year is now called Rosh Hashanah, and it happens in our month of September, more or less. It's when they have finished harvesting all the fruits of the trees, the nuts, the figs, the dates. And it's at the end of a long drought, because in the land where Jesus grew up, you have 2 seasons. One season is no rain for 6 months. The other season is some rain for the other 6 months, depending on where you live. So Rosh Hashanah is the official Jewish New Year, which ends with what they call the Days of Awe, when people kind of examine themselves, and they have a special ceremony called Yom Kippur. And in that ceremony, they say, I have kept all the promises I made, but not quite. And these are the promises I made that I didn't keep. The things I didn't promise to do and didn't do. And so somebody gets up and sings a beautiful Kol Nidre, all my vows, may they be as though they aren't any vows. And so the deal is this: when you have confessed all the promises you made that you didn't quite keep, God forgives the rest, which is a very nice thing to believe. Yeah. And then they have some special prayers for rain. Because if they're lucky, the rains start. The first rains come in what we would call October. And to give the Almighty a hint, they take dry brush and dry grass as they pray for rain. Now, we think that it was about palm leaves. It wasn't. No, it wasn't about palm branches at all. It was about dry grass. They're praying for rain, and they kind of lay out the problem. And the early rains come, if they get the rain they want, what we'd call late October. And that's enough to loosen the ground. And so they go out there with an old-fashioned plow back in Jesus' day, and they plow it so that it's ready to receive the next rains. And what you can do then is you throw the seed in the ground while you've got it kind of cultivated, and then it will sprout when the rains come. And it really starts to grow in our month of January. Now, 3 times I took students over to the Holy Land in January, and they couldn't believe it. Everything was green. Yep. Looked like May back here in Iowa. So, they would follow the seasons. And of course, the seasons depend on where you live anyway. And along the way, we had to learn that if you go by the moon, you'll get, well, what happens among Muslims is this. They pay no attention to nature. The first month of the year is the year when Muhammad, the Rasulullah, the messenger of God, left his hometown because they wanted to kick him out, and he went to Medina. Now that has nothing to do with nature, and that's why the new year for Muslims comes just about any time of the year. It all has to do with the story of the Prophet Muhammad. And there are a whole lot of calendars like that. Now, in Christianity, we have a special calendar that we could call it the church calendar. And if you're a Lutheran or a Catholic or an Episcopalian or even some Methodist, when is the beginning of the church year? It's called Advent. People who don't go to church that's crazy to them. So we have a kind of a special church here that only people who go to church regularly know anything about. And maybe every religion has its own calendar. There are several calendars that follow the moon. But if you follow the moon, you just got to kind of wait and see what the moon is going to be like this month. Oh, it's all kind of silly. Now, there are creatures a lot smarter than people. And they seem to know when it's time to fly north or fly south or swim south, like the whales do. And they have a clock inside themselves, I guess. Although sometimes they get a little bit mixed up. Yesterday I looked out in front. I couldn't believe it. I saw a Baltimore Oriole. I thought, it's way too early. And somebody else told me they saw bluebirds. Well, the weather has been changing. Probably you know that. There's some people who think that's a bunch of hogwash. Oh no, the weather has been changing, and for the first time in history, it's been changed by the way human beings behave. Oh my goodness. It was complicated enough before we messed it up. But we human beings mess things up more than any other creatures in the world. In their own way, they're all smarter than we are. Anyway, spring will come one of these days. Now I'll just slip in something else. I grew up on several different farms, and to me, March means mud. Oh boy. Remember, if you grew up in the country, how muddy it was in March? March and mud go together better than march and war. So, if it's muddy, well, if you live in town, it's all right. There are sidewalks, or if you don't have to leave the building. Some of you don't have to leave the building. Anyway, those are the things to think about today. Or, if you need a good laugh, there's lots of good laughs connected with the calendars. But keep in mind that a month is a month. Better believe it.
Thank you.
Okay.